There are moments when you speak and feel an immediate gap between your intention and how your words are received. You begin a sentence, hoping to create connection, but the other person's attention slips in small ways. A drifting look, a distracted gesture, a polite expression that carries none of the depth of listening. You try to adjust by adding more detail or by speeding up as if urgency could force understanding, but the more you push, the less impact you create. Your thoughts scatter, your tone shifts, and suddenly the conversation feels like you're reaching for something that keeps moving farther away. Meanwhile, someone else enters the same space, speaks calmly, sometimes even slowly, and the entire atmosphere rearranges itself around them. They do not try to impress. They do not chase attention. Their presence does the work for them. The Stoics understood this dynamic well. They knew that communication is not primarily shaped by vocabulary or technique, but by the internal state behind the words. A restless mind produces rushed language. A tense mind produces defensive speech. But a centered mind produces clarity. People may not analyze this consciously, but they feel it instantly. They can sense when someone is grounded, when someone thinks before reacting, when someone carries a calm authority that does not need to be announced. This video begins with the first of 7 English words that reflect this kind of inner steadiness. Each one affects the tone of your conversations in a subtle but powerful way. And the first of them is a word that few people use deliberately, yet it reveals more maturity than most long explanations. The first word is pause. Most people rush through conversations without realizing how fast they are moving. They speak as if they are afraid the moment will disappear before they finish. They jump from thought to thought, filling every second with sound, believing that continuous speech proves confidence. But confidence does not come from speed, it comes from control. Pause is the word that brings that control back into your hands. When you use it consciously, both internally and externally, something shifts immediately. You stop reacting, and you begin responding. You stop speaking from pressure, and you begin speaking from clarity. To say, pause, is to regain ownership of the moment. Sometimes you say it out loud, let me pause for a second, and other times you simply say it to yourself in silence. In both cases, the effect is similar. The conversation slows down enough for your mind to think clearly. People often assume that silence weakens them, but the opposite is true. A deliberate pause communicates stability. It says that you are not controlled by impulse or emotion. You are not rushing to fill the space. You are choosing your next thought instead of being dragged by it. When someone is angry or anxious, conversations escalate because no one pauses. One reacts to the reaction of the other, and the cycle grows louder and faster. But when one person introduces a pause, everything reorganizes. The emotional tension begins to lose hold. The other person often adjusts their tone without even realizing it. The simple act of slowing down communicates that you are not entering the chaos, you are holding your ground. And people instinctively trust those who hold their ground. Pause also creates clarity. Many misunderstandings happen not because people disagree, but because they answer too quickly, before they truly understand the message. The pause gives you time to interpret what was actually said rather than what your emotions assumed. It allows you to breathe, to think, to choose the angle from which you want to respond. This is the foundation of mature communication. Not the ability to speak well, but the ability to direct your mind before speaking. There is another dimension to pause that often goes unnoticed. It gives others the chance to reveal more. When you pause instead of rushing to answer, you create space the other person was not expecting. And in that space, they often continue, clarify, or go deeper. A pause invites truth. People say more when they do not feel pressured. They express themselves with greater honesty when the silence does not threaten them. This silence becomes a signal of safety, not discomfort. The Stoics practiced pausing as a way to examine their thoughts before letting them leave the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote repeatedly about the importance of separating impulse from action, noise from intention. The pause is exactly that separation. It is the doorway between feeling and expression, between reaction and decision. When you pause, you choose your place in the conversation. You decide whether you want to amplify the situation or calm it. You decide whether the next word will be rooted in wisdom or in agitation. There is tremendous power in this choice. People notice when someone uses pauses deliberately. They sense that you are not carried by the environment but anchored within yourself. They feel that you are present without being impulsive. They often begin to mirror your rhythm, speaking with more care, reducing tension, becoming more reflective. Human beings adjust themselves to the emotional pace of the strongest presence in the room, and the strongest presence is not the loudest one. It is the one who pauses. Pause may seem like a small word, but it is the gateway to everything that follows. Without it, there is no clarity. Without clarity, there is no presence. And without presence, there is no influence. When you learn to pause, you learn to lead the emotional tone of the conversation rather than being shaped by it. You communicate without rushing, you think without noise, and you speak from a place that others instinctively respect. This is the beginning of transformation. Not speaking more, but speaking from a deeper center. Pause is the first word because everything else depends on it. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this work reach more people who are trying to build a stronger, calmer, more centered mind. Now, let's move to the second word, a word that communicates a kind of presence most people never master. The second word is noted. At first, noted seems almost too simple to carry weight, but that is exactly what makes it powerful. It does not exaggerate, it does not decorate, it does not dramatize. It acknowledges. And acknowledgement is something people crave more deeply than agreement. When you tell someone, noted, you are saying, I heard you. I registered what you said. You don't need to repeat yourself. This small shift transforms the atmosphere of a conversation, because most of the tension people feel comes from the fear of not being recognized. Most individuals repeat themselves because they sense their message didn't land. They amplify their tone, add unnecessary details, or restructure arguments just to guarantee that their point was not lost. When someone feels the need to insist, it's not because they enjoy repeating. It's because they do not trust they were understood. Noted provides certainty. It eliminates the insecurity that drives unnecessary explanation. It gently closes the loop and tells the other person, you've made your point, I'm not ignoring you. This word carries authority without aggression. When you use it, you show that you are not reacting emotionally but registering information with clarity. It communicates composure. You are not overwhelmed, not confused, not defensive. You are simply aware. In many situations, this is more disarming than any long sentence. It keeps the conversation from spinning into emotional noise. One of the reasons noted works so well is because it bypasses the ego's need to win. Many conversations deteriorate because someone replies with a counterargument too quickly. The other person hears the counterargument as dismissal, not as dialogue, and then the conflict grows. Noted pauses that escalation. It establishes that you are listening before you are responding, that you are processing before you are judging. People lower their guard around someone who shows this kind of restraint. There is also a psychological effect at play. When you say, noted, you reduce emotional friction. You communicate that you can handle what is said without overreacting. Whether the person brought a complaint, a disagreement, or an uncomfortable truth, your answer shows that you're not intimidated by it. This stability changes the energy immediately. People become less defensive because they realize they don't need to fight to be heard. Stoic philosophy emphasizes the importance of receiving impressions calmly before deciding what to do with them. Noted embodies this principle. It separates the stimulus from the reaction. You're acknowledging the impression without letting it control your next move. For the Stoics, that gap, the space between impression and action, is where freedom lives. When you say, noted, you are practicing that freedom. This word also prevents misunderstandings. Many arguments begin because people assume the other person ignored something important. When you use noted, you remove that assumption instantly. You show that recognition and agreement are not the same thing. You can acknowledge a point without surrendering your perspective. You can say, noted, and still hold your ground. That distinction keeps conversations balanced rather than adversarial. Another dimension of noted is its ability to steady your own mind. When you choose this response intentionally, you interrupt automatic emotional reactions. Instead of defending yourself, explaining too much, or pushing back prematurely, you anchor yourself. You gain a moment to evaluate the situation from a higher vantage point. This is how emotional discipline begins. Not by controlling the world, but by controlling the internal pace of your response. People quickly notice when you communicate this way. They sense that you don't get dragged into drama, that you don't crumble under criticism, and that you don't lose yourself in emotional noise. Your presence becomes something people adjust to, not the other way around. You become the stable point in the conversation, and stability always draws respect. Noted also removes pressure from the other person. They feel that they don't need to push harder, raise their voice, or search for more convincing words. They understand that their message reached you. That alone often transforms their tone. Instead of continuing in tension, they shift into reflection. Instead of arguing endlessly, they pause. Your acknowledgement becomes a reset button for the entire interaction. And there is another subtle benefit. Noted teaches you to respond proportionally. Not every comment requires a paragraph. Not every disagreement deserves a debate. When you use this word, you avoid giving unnecessary weight to issues that don't require escalation. It is a form of emotional economy, spending only the energy that the moment truly needs. Over time, noted becomes more than a word you use in conversations. It becomes a mental habit. You begin to internally note your own reactions. Noted, I'm getting irritated. Noted, I'm tempted to defend myself. Noted, this hit a sensitive place. That awareness creates distance between you and your impulses. It is the beginning of mastery. And the reason this word is so powerful is because it blends clarity with calmness. It does not try to prove anything. It does not try to win. It simply acknowledges reality before deciding what comes next. It is quiet strength, the kind that does not need to announce itself to be felt. In conversations, people remember those who make them feel heard without being overwhelmed. With noted, you become that kind of presence, someone who listens with discipline, responds with intention, and stays centered even when the mood around you shifts. There is a point in every meaningful conversation where the other person reveals something slightly deeper than what they intended. It might show in the way their voice softens, in the hesitation before a specific detail, or in the tension that suddenly appears when they touch a sensitive subject. These shifts are subtle, but they contain more truth than the sentence itself. If you answer too quickly, you break the moment. If you defend yourself, you close it. If you respond intellectually, you miss the emotional layer beneath the words. But there is one response that holds the moment steady and tells the other person that what they shared was received with presence, not judgment. The third word is understood. Understood is not the same as agreement. It doesn't tell the person that you think they are right. It doesn't promise a solution. It doesn't mean the problem is resolved. What it says is something far more fundamental. I grasp what this means to you. Most people go through life rarely feeling that. They feel the need to repeat themselves because they suspect their point was ignored. They speak louder because they think volume will replace recognition. They over-explain because they believe people will not understand unless they force the message. When you simply say, understood, much of that internal pressure dissolves instantly. This word builds a bridge between two emotional worlds. Instead of escalating tension, it lowers it. Instead of challenging what the person feels, it acknowledges it. The moment you say, understood, you tell them that they do not need to justify every detail. They no longer need to fight for space. They no longer need to defend their emotional reality. The conversation becomes safer, calmer, and more honest, not because you solved anything, but because you recognize the weight behind their words. Understood also redefines the role you play in the exchange. Most people listen defensively, waiting for something to counter, correct, or use as proof that their own viewpoint is valid. But when you say, understood, you shift out of that defensive stance. You signal that you are not preparing a counterargument, not competing for control, and not interpreting their words through the lens of your own insecurity. Instead, you are listening with intention. This removes an enormous amount of emotional noise from the conversation. Stoic thinkers believed that strength is revealed in a person's ability to remain steady while facing the emotional storms of others. Understood captures that strength. You show that you can stand in the middle of someone's frustration, confusion, or vulnerability without losing your balance. You are not absorbing the emotion, but you are acknowledging it. This distinction is what allows you to stay centered while helping the other person regain their own clarity. Another reason this word carries so much influence is that it interrupts instinctive reactions. People often speak out of fear: fear of not being heard, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being dismissed. When they hear understood, those fears soften. They shift from reaction to reflection. They begin to express themselves more clearly because they realize they do not need to fight. The environment becomes one of cooperation rather than collision. Using understood also reveals your character. It shows that you value comprehension more than dominance. You are not trying to win the conversation or shape it to your advantage. You are trying to see things clearly. Most people hear through layers of ego, assuming criticism where there is none, imagining threats that do not exist. But when you use understood, you step out of those distortions. You look directly at the truth of what the person is expressing instead of reacting to your own interpretations. Over time, people notice. They begin to trust you not because you always agree with them, but because you consistently understand them. They sense that you will not twist their words or rush to conclusions. They feel that you are capable of hearing difficult truths without collapsing or attacking. This makes your presence emotionally safe, and emotional safety is incredibly rare. Understood is also deeply effective in moments of conflict. Arguments often escalate not because of disagreement, but because neither person feels recognized. Someone says something important, the other responds defensively, and the cycle intensifies. But if you say, understood, with genuine sincerity, you stop the escalation. You acknowledge the emotion without surrendering your position. You create space where clarity can enter. This doesn't solve everything immediately, but it changes the direction of the conversation. The more you use this word intentionally, the more it trains your mind. You start noticing when your ego tries to interrupt, when your impatience tries to take the lead, when your assumptions try to speak for you. Understood becomes not just something you say to others, but something you tell yourself: I understand what I'm feeling, and I don't need to react from it. That is how internal mastery begins. Eventually, understood becomes more than a verbal response. It becomes a way of being, receptive, attentive, composed. People gravitate toward those who make them feel recognized, especially in a world where real listening is rare. They might not remember every detail of the conversation, but they will remember the experience of feeling understood. And when someone feels understood, the entire tone of the relationship changes. Honesty becomes easier. Trust forms naturally. Depth replaces performance. And you become the person who can hold space for truth without fear. The kind of presence that shapes the world quietly, simply by staying steady when others can't. There are moments in conversation when someone brings you an idea, a concern, a hesitation, or even a criticism, and beneath their words there is an unspoken question. Will you take this seriously? People rarely express this directly, but the need is always there. No one wants their thoughts dismissed without reflection. No one wants to feel that their perspective, however small, was treated as irrelevant. And yet this is exactly what happens in most interactions. People listen only long enough to respond, not long enough to think. That is why a single word can change everything. The fourth word is considered. When you say considered, you are doing something that most people never experience. You are signaling that what they said entered your mind with enough depth to influence your thinking, even if you do not agree. You are telling them that their input was not wasted breath. It was evaluated. It mattered long enough to exist inside your reasoning. And for many people, that experience is rare enough to feel almost like respect becoming visible. Considered is different from noted, and it is different from understood. Noted says you registered the information. Understood says you grasped the emotional or logical meaning of it. Considered says you gave it weight. People crave that weight. They want to know that their thoughts have an effect on the world around them, even if the effect is small. When you tell someone considered, you acknowledge something deeper than the content of their message. You acknowledge their agency. This word also slows down the emotional pace of the conversation. Most conflicts arise because one side feels ignored or minimized. The moment someone senses that their perspective was disregarded, they escalate. They repeat the point, insist, intensify, argue, or shut down entirely. But when they hear considered, the escalation loses its fuel. You're showing that their message didn't bounce off your mind. It actually entered. That alone reduces 80% of unnecessary tension. Considered also shifts the way you see yourself in the interaction. Instead of reacting impulsively, you become someone who reflects before responding. You show that you have the discipline to think slowly even when the moment is fast. This is a uniquely Stoic quality, the ability to choose your pace instead of being dragged by emotion. Conversations often move too quickly, with meaning getting lost in the rush. By using considered, you create a moment of intentional slowing down, which gives depth to what would otherwise become noise. A surprising effect of this word is that it improves the quality of the thoughts people bring you. When others realize you genuinely consider what they say, they start offering more thoughtful input. They stop shrinking their ideas. They stop censoring themselves. They stop filtering what they believe will matter. Instead, they speak with more honesty because they trust the weight of your attention. Your presence becomes a catalyst for better conversations. In a world full of immediate reactions, considered introduces maturity. You are no longer someone who rushes to defend your view. You are someone who listens with the intention of learning something, even from a perspective you disagree with. This does not make you passive. It makes you more precise. It means you do not waste energy arguing before you fully understand the implications of what was said. You evaluate first, respond later. That alone separates you from most people. This word also communicates fairness. When you say considered, you imply that you did not discard the message based on emotion, pride, impatience, or habit. You gave the idea a chance to exist inside your reasoning before you decided what to do with it. In a world where most people feel unheard, this fairness is powerful. It builds trust without you having to convince anyone of anything. People can feel fairness. They do not need it explained. Considered also protects you from overreacting. Instead of replying from irritation, fatigue, or instinct, you step into a more deliberate posture. You detach your identity from the moment long enough to evaluate the information objectively. You give yourself space to decide whether the idea deserves agreement, disagreement, or simply acknowledgement. This distance between the message and the reaction is exactly where emotional mastery lives. The Stoics practiced something similar repeatedly. They believed that no impression should be accepted immediately without examination. They argued that the mind must become a gatekeeper, not a sponge. Considered captures that principle. You allow information in, but you decide what it becomes. You are not controlled by the moment. You are evaluating it. Another powerful effect arises when considered is used in disagreements. Most arguments become destructive because both sides feel invalidated. They are not seeking victory, they are seeking recognition. When you say, your point is considered, even if you disagree afterward, you remove hostility from the exchange. You transform argument into dialogue. You show that you respect the person without surrendering your view. This balance is rare and immediately noticed. Over time, people begin to perceive you as someone who thinks deeply before moving. Someone who does not rush. Someone who gives weight to what is said rather than reacting to the surface of it. They trust your steadiness and your ability to hold a conversation without collapsing into emotional chaos. You become someone they approach when they need clarity, not noise. And the transformation is not only external. You change internally as well. The more you intentionally use considered, the more your mind begins to slow down naturally. You start evaluating your own thoughts with the same discipline. You pause before responding. You question your impulses. You gain awareness of how your emotions attempt to guide you, and you learn to choose the path deliberately instead of automatically. Eventually, considered becomes part of your internal vocabulary. You hear your own reactions and say, considered, before acting on them. This simple shift creates space between stimulus and action, the very space where the Stoics believe true freedom begins. And in your external relationships, people feel the difference. They feel that you are someone who thinks, not someone who reacts. Someone who reflects, not someone who judges blindly. Someone who gives weight to words, which makes your own words carry even more weight in return. Some conversations don't fail because of disagreement, but because one person feels emotionally invisible. You can sense this happening when someone begins speaking with clarity but slowly loses confidence as the dialogue continues. Their tone drops, their sentences shrink, and you notice them scanning your face for signs of recognition. When they don't find it, they start repeating themselves, adding explanations they never wanted to give, or withdrawing altogether. It's not the content that discourages them, it's the absence of acknowledgement. People can handle opposition, correction, and even hard truths, but very few can tolerate feeling unseen. The fifth word is acknowledged. This is a rare word because it demands awareness without surrender, empathy without softness, and clarity without emotional entanglement. When you say acknowledged, you are not agreeing with the person, nor are you validating the correctness of their interpretation. You are validating the existence of their experience. You are showing them that the moment they just shared has been registered in your awareness, not brushed aside or minimized. This simple recognition often holds more power than offering advice or solutions. What makes acknowledged so effective is that it lands with firmness. It does not sound like reassurance. It does not sound like emotional comforting. It sounds like recognition backed by presence. People do not need you to mirror their feelings. They need to know their feelings were not ignored. Acknowledged gives them that without blurring the boundaries of your own identity. In many interactions, emotional escalation happens because someone feels they are being pushed into invisibility. When their sadness is treated as overreaction, their frustration as irrationality, or their concern as inconvenience, they instinctively raise the intensity of their expression. They are not trying to create conflict, they are trying to be heard. The moment you say acknowledged, the need for escalation disappears. The emotion settles because the person finally receives the psychological recognition they were seeking. Acknowledged also establishes you as someone who can remain composed in emotionally complex situations. You are not overwhelmed by intensity, and you do not retreat when someone speaks from vulnerability or discomfort. Instead, you stand steady, signaling that you are capable of holding the emotional weight without collapsing under it. This is a rare form of strength, silent, unforced, unmistakable. Stoic philosophy emphasized engaging with reality as it is, not as you want it to be. Using acknowledged is an application of that principle. You are recognizing the truth of the moment without amplifying it or denying it. You're not debating the feeling. You're not trying to fix it. You are accepting that this is what exists right now. Acceptance is not agreement. It is clarity. There is also a strategic advantage in using acknowledged. When someone expresses something difficult or uncomfortable, the natural instinct is often to defend yourself, justify your intentions, or immediately present your own perspective. But this usually increases tension. If you begin with acknowledged, you interrupt the defensive impulse, both in yourself and in the other person. The emotional temperature drops. The conversation becomes more logical and less reactive. You create room for resolution rather than collision. People instantly notice the difference between someone who acknowledges and someone who reacts. The reactive person sends signals of insecurity, tightening their posture, rushing their speech, raising their tone. The person who acknowledges sends signals of grounded confidence. They do not need to overpower anyone to hold their position. They do not need to escalate to be taken seriously. They hold their presence steady, and that steadiness influences the entire environment. Acknowledged has another quiet effect. It invites honesty. When people trust that their emotions will be received without ridicule or dismissal, they speak more directly. They stop hiding their true concerns behind sarcasm, jokes, or defensive barriers. They reveal the actual issue rather than circling around it. You become someone they can speak to without bracing themselves for impact. This is not softness. This is stability. As you practice this word, you begin to notice how often people simply need recognition, not correction. You become more skilled at distinguishing between the two. You also begin noticing your own emotions with the same clarity. When an uncomfortable feeling arises internally, you start acknowledging it rather than suppressing it. Acknowledged, I'm irritated. Acknowledged, I feel rushed. Acknowledged, this touches something sensitive. That internal honesty makes you far less reactive and far more composed. Over time, acknowledged becomes part of your character. People start trusting you precisely because you do not collapse under emotional pressure. They understand that you don't avoid uncomfortable truths, and you don't hide behind superficial politeness. You face things directly, but with control. You see emotions, but you do not drown in them. You recognize the moment without letting it master you. In relationships, both personal and professional, this word becomes a compass. It prevents misunderstandings from turning into conflict. It stops defensiveness before it begins. It communicates maturity without requiring long explanations. And it subtly reinforces a powerful message. I am present enough to see you, and strong enough to remain myself while doing so. Ultimately, acknowledged is the bridge between emotional recognition and emotional stability. It grounds the connection without compromising your integrity. It gives the other person a sense of visibility while keeping you centered. It is a word that balances empathy with authority, presence with detachment, clarity with calmness. And once people experience what it feels like to be acknowledged by someone steady, they rarely forget it. They return to that presence because it makes them feel more human, more honest, and more grounded than they feel anywhere else. The sixth word is respected. It is a word that carries a quiet strength, because it recognizes something people rarely name out loud: the desire to have their boundaries, choices, and perspectives treated with dignity. Respected communicates that what the person said was not dismissed, minimized, or treated as a temporary inconvenience. Instead, it was received as something meaningful, something that deserves space. You are not agreeing with them. You are acknowledging that their position stands on its own, independent of your approval. And in a world where people constantly feel pressured to defend their identity, this distinction is powerful. When someone expresses a decision, a boundary, or a personal truth, there is usually a vulnerable layer beneath it. Even the strongest individuals feel exposed when saying, "This is my limit," or "This is how I see it." Without respect, that vulnerability closes instantly. The person withdraws, becomes guarded, or starts explaining themselves excessively. Not because they want to, but because they fear not being taken seriously. When you answer with respected, the fear dissolves. The person no longer has to justify their stance. Their dignity has already been affirmed. Respected also reveals a great deal about your internal stability. People who are insecure react defensively to the boundaries of others. They take limits personally, as if someone else's independence threatens their own identity. But when you say respected, you show that you are not threatened by differences. You are grounded enough to allow someone's truth to exist without needing to reshape it. This creates a rare emotional environment, one where honesty can rise without fear. The Stoics believed that respecting the nature of things was a fundamental virtue. Respected embodies that mindset. You are not trying to control the person's preferences or convince them to bend to your expectations. You are acknowledging the reality of their position. This does not weaken you. It strengthens you. It shows you have enough discipline to step out of the ego's need to dominate and into the clarity of accepting what simply is. Another reason respected is such a transformative word is because it prevents unnecessary conflict. Many arguments erupt not because people fundamentally disagree, but because one person feels belittled. They feel their thoughts were handled carelessly, or that their boundaries were treated as negotiable. When someone hears respected, the tension drops. They realize they don't have to fight for validation. Their perspective has already been given the seriousness it deserved. This word also improves the way people communicate with you. Once they sense that their boundaries are respected rather than challenged, they become more open, more direct, and more honest. They stop hiding their real concerns behind politeness or defensiveness. You become someone they can talk to without bracing for judgment. Respect disarms resistance more effectively than persuasion ever could. Respected also protects your own integrity. When you use this word intentionally, you train your mind to acknowledge others without erasing yourself in the process. You can say, "Your decision is respected," while still keeping your own opinion intact. You can say, "Your limit is respected," while maintaining your own boundaries. Respect does not require agreement, it requires clarity. And clarity is what keeps you from being pulled into emotional chaos. The word also enhances the authority of your presence. People trust individuals who respect boundaries, not because they are agreeable, but because they are predictable in their steadiness. They know you won't punish honesty. They know you won't explode when faced with difference. They know you can hold the weight of someone else's truth without shaking. Authority built on this kind of consistency is far stronger than authority built on dominance. There is another layer to respected that often goes unnoticed. It quietly raises the standard of how people treat you in return. When you consistently show respect for the boundaries of others, they begin to recognize the structure of your own boundaries as well. They stop pushing past your limits. They stop testing your patience. They stop assuming they can override your values. Respect tends to flow back toward the person who offers it with steadiness. Over time, this word becomes part of your character. You start approaching conversations with the intention of dignifying the other person without surrendering your own strength. You begin to notice how often conflict is born not from disagreement, but from someone feeling disrespected. With that awareness, your presence becomes more strategic, more precise, more aligned with reason rather than impulse. Using respected consistently also shapes your internal world. You begin to respect your own limits more clearly. You stop apologizing for boundaries that protect your peace. You stop forcing yourself into situations where your values are compromised. You learn that respecting others is inseparable from respecting yourself. And as this balance grows inside you, your communication gains a depth that most people never achieve. In relationships, whether personal, professional, or casual, this word becomes a quiet stabilizer. It neutralizes defensiveness. It disarms hostility. It settles confusion. It communicates maturity without theatrics. And it positions you as someone who interacts not from ego, but from clarity. Respected is not loud. It does not demand anything, but its weight is unmistakable. When someone hears it, they know that their reality has been recognized and that the conversation is taking place on solid ground. And when people consistently feel respected in your presence, they naturally trust you, follow you, and open up to you. This is what turns communication into influence. Not volume, not argument, not force, but respect delivered with unwavering calm. The seventh word is accepted. It is a quiet word, but one that carries a tremendous psychological weight. When someone shares something personal, a mistake, a confession, a disappointment, a change of direction, a belief, or even a part of their identity, they are rarely searching for agreement. They are searching for the assurance that the truth they revealed does not immediately create distance. Accepted signals that the space between you did not shrink under judgment. It remained intact. And that simple experience is one of the rarest in human communication. Many people spend their lives trying to earn acceptance by altering themselves, shrinking parts of who they are, or exaggerating qualities they don't naturally possess. They do this because they have repeatedly experienced rejection in moments of honesty. They learned that showing their truth can provoke criticism, ridicule, or punishment. When someone hears accepted, especially after revealing something sensitive, they feel a kind of relief that goes deeper than approval. They feel safe. Accepted does not mean endorsement. It does not mean you adopt the person's belief, share their decision, or mirror their emotional state. It means that the version of themselves they just revealed still has a place in the conversation. You are not pushing them away. You are not withdrawing. You are not rewriting the moment into something more comfortable for you. You are stating, with calm firmness, that the truth they shared does not threaten the connection. This is what gives accepted its unique power. It dissolves the fear of exclusion. Every human being carries that fear somewhere inside them. Even the strongest people, even those who appear emotionally solid, feel a moment of hesitation before revealing something vulnerable. They wonder, silently, will this change how you see me? When you respond with accepted, you remove that question. You anchor the moment so that honesty does not have to defend itself. In Stoic philosophy, acceptance is not passivity. It is clarity. It is the recognition that reality is what it is, not what your preferences demand it to be. When you say accepted, you embody this principle in communication. You are acknowledging the truth of the other person's internal world without trying to control or edit it. This strengthens the relationship because it allows each person to remain themselves rather than shrinking to avoid conflict. One of the reasons accepted is so transformative is because it signals emotional independence. A person who is insecure will often react strongly to anything that challenges their sense of control. They may reject parts of others because they unconsciously reject those same parts in themselves. But a person who can say, accepted, shows that they are not threatened by difference. They are stable enough to allow another person's reality to exist next to their own. This is emotional maturity in its purest form. Accepted also prevents unnecessary conflict. Many disagreements escalate not because the content is difficult, but because someone feels that who they are is being rejected. They stop debating ideas and start defending themselves. The conversation moves from logic to identity. But when you use accepted, you separate the two. You show that the person can remain who they are, even if the views differ. This removes the emotional sting from the exchange and makes resolution possible. Another remarkable quality of this word is the way it encourages openness. People who feel accepted reveal more truth. They share the deeper layers they normally hide. They speak without filtering themselves to avoid offense or disappointment. You become someone they can bring their real thoughts to, not the sanitized version, not the edited version, but the honest version. This kind of connection cannot be forced. It is earned through the steady presence that accepted communicates. Over time, this word changes the way people experience you. They see that you do not react with judgment, that you do not use their honesty against them, and that you do not require them to camouflage their inner reality to maintain your comfort. This makes you a rare presence, someone who brings ease into difficult conversations and stability into uncertain moments. Accepted is also an inner practice. When you begin using it intentionally with others, you start noticing the parts of yourself that you have refused to accept. You begin recognizing the emotions you pushed away, the flaws you hid, the past you never acknowledged. You start treating your own internal world with the same clarity. Accepted, this is what I feel. Accepted, this is part of my story. Accepted, this moment is real. This internal acceptance allows you to move forward instead of remaining stuck in self-conflict. As this mindset deepens, your communication becomes more authentic. You no longer speak from a place of trying to protect an image. You speak from a place of stability. You recognize that being accepted does not require perfection, and you give that same freedom to others. This creates an atmosphere where trust grows naturally, without effort. In relationships, both personal and professional, accepted becomes a powerful stabilizer. It prevents people from spiraling into insecurity. It stops them from interpreting your silence as rejection. It anchors the connection during moments of tension. And it communicates a level of emotional intelligence that few people ever develop. The beauty of this word is that it is both strong and gentle. It does not overpower. It does not demand. It does not fix. It simply recognizes what is, and by doing so, gives others the courage to show themselves honestly. And when people experience that in your presence, they remember it. They remember who they were allowed to be when they talk to you. Accepted turns conversations into safe territory, not because they are easy, but because they are real. And a real conversation, grounded in acceptance, has the power to reshape how two people understand each other, and themselves. A person's influence is not built in the moments when they speak the most, but in the moments when their presence alters the emotional landscape of the room without force. Words can impress, but presence anchors. And presence is nothing more than the expression of an inner state. The discipline, the clarity, the self-awareness, and the emotional maturity that shape how you move through every interaction. The 7 words you learn throughout this video are not techniques for social advantage. They are expressions of a mind that refuses to be ruled by impulse or insecurity. A person who can pause before reacting moves differently. A person who listens long enough to truly understand stands out. A person who gives weight to the thoughts of others without losing their own ground is rare. Someone who acknowledges emotions without being consumed by them becomes a source of stability. Someone who respects boundaries, both theirs and others, walks through the world with a quiet sense of dignity. And someone who can accept reality. The reality of the moment, the reality of another person's truth, the reality of their own inner world, carries a depth that most never reach. These 7 words are not powerful because of how they sound. They are powerful because of what they require from you internally. Anyone can memorize a phrase. Very few can embody the state of mind that gives that phrase weight. Without presence, words fall flat. Without discipline, words fracture under pressure. Without self-respect, words become strategies instead of reflections of character. But when your mind is steady, your emotions are regulated, and your identity is not threatened by disagreement or discomfort, these 7 words become natural extensions of who you are. Pause. Noted, understood, considered, acknowledged, respected, accepted. 7 simple expressions that have nothing to do with sounding impressive and everything to do with becoming someone who communicates with integrity. Each word invites a different kind of strength. The strength to slow down, the strength to listen, the strength to stay calm, the strength to reflect, the strength to recognize emotion without becoming it, the strength to honor boundaries, and the strength to allow truth to exist without reshaping it to suit your preferences. Most people go through life trying to be interesting, chasing attention, performing confidence, projecting certainty. But influence is rarely crafted through performance. It is crafted through composure. It emerges when people feel safer, calmer, clearer, and more understood in your presence than they do on their own. You become someone they trust not because you talk loudly, but because your presence invites honesty and dissolves tension. When you embody these 7 words, you stop competing for space and start creating it. You stop reacting to every emotional wave and start shaping the emotional tone of the conversation. You stop defending yourself automatically and start choosing responses that reflect your values instead of your fears. And something powerful happens. People begin adjusting to your pace. They begin speaking with more intention. They begin lowering their emotional volume. They begin showing you the side of themselves they normally hide. They gravitate toward you without even realizing why. This is influence in its purest form, not loud, not dramatic, not decorated. Influence built through presence does not fade. Influence built through character is not easily replaced. And influence built through emotional steadiness is remembered long after the conversation ends. The truth is, most people do not need more words. They need a stronger inner foundation from which their words can emerge. These 7 expressions are the outward signs of that foundation. Practicing them will not only improve how others experience your presence, but will also reshape how you experience yourself. You will begin noticing the moments when your discipline strengthens, when your reactions soften, when your thinking becomes clearer. You will begin to feel the shift from emotional reactivity to intentional communication. And once you taste that clarity, it becomes difficult to return to the old patterns. The journey toward this kind of presence is not complicated, but it requires intention. It requires stepping out of automatic habits and into deliberate awareness. It requires choosing calm when chaos invites you to react. It requires choosing depth when superficiality would be easier. And it requires choosing truth, emotional, relational, internal truth, even when it makes the moment uncomfortable. If you start practicing these 7 words with sincerity, you will quickly notice how people respond differently. They will become more open, more honest, more respectful, more drawn to your steadiness. They will sense that conversations with you carry a different kind of gravity, a groundedness that comes not from dominance, but from clarity. And now, as we close this video, I want you to choose one of these 7 words to apply in the next 24 hours. Not all of them, just one. The one that challenges you the most. The one that exposes something you've been avoiding. The one that makes you confront a part of yourself you're ready to refine. Write it in the comments below. Declare it. Commit to it. That simple act can shift your communication more than you imagine. And if you want to continue developing this presence, the presence that calms others, strengthens you, and transforms every conversation. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notifications. There is much more to build, much more to understand, and much more strength waiting inside you.